You tell your dog the vet is just a car ride. You crouch down, scratch behind the ears, use the voice you save for walks and dinner. Everything about the performance says this is going to be fun. And the dog gets in the car. But slowly. Ears pinned. Weight shifted to the back legs. Tail low. You lied. And something in that animal caught it before you even finished the sentence. Do animals actually know when you're lying? Or have they been watching you so carefully, for so long, that your honesty stopped mattering a long time ago? Let's start with what you can't hide. Not your words. You control those fine. Your body. When you're uneasy about something, stressed, uncertain, saying one thing while feeling another, your autonomic nervous system responds whether you want it to or not. Your heart rate shifts. Cortisol enters your sweat. Volatile compounds in your breath change composition. None of this registers to you. But in 2022, Clara Wilson and her team at Queen's University Belfast collected breath and sweat samples from people in calm and stressed states, then presented those samples to trained dogs. The dogs distinguished the stress samples with 93.75% accuracy. That's not lie detection. The study measured stress responses, not deception. But it means your body is broadcasting something during moments of internal conflict, and a dog's 300 million olfactory receptors are picking it up whether you want them to or not. And smell is one channel. Dogs track where your eyes go before you turn your head. They read your posture before you've finished deciding what to do. They catch the micro-hesitation in your hand before you point. Research shows they follow human gaze more accurately than chimpanzees. More accurately than wolves raised alongside humans from birth. You can rehearse the smile, you can steady your voice, but the chemistry leaking through your skin and the tension settling into your hands, that part runs on its own. And the dog has had 15,000 years to learn what it means. But reading you is one thing. Remembering what you did with it is another. In 2015, Akiko Takaoka and her team at Kyoto University tested whether dogs would keep following pointing cues from a human who had already sent them to an empty container. The setup was simple. First round, a researcher pointed at a container with food inside. The dog followed and found the reward. Second round, same researcher, same confidence, same gesture, but this time the container was empty. Third round, the researcher pointed at the correct container again. Food inside, everything identical to round one. By then, far fewer dogs followed. They'd been misled once, and once was enough. The researchers' pointing had stopped being worth trusting. One trial of bad information. One revision. A model of that specific human, updated in real time. Here's where it gets harder to explain away. In 2021, Lucrezia Leonardo and her team at the University of Vienna ran a study with 260 dogs using a design borrowed from human developmental psychology. 2 opaque buckets, one with food. A human communicator pointed the dog toward the wrong bucket every time. But there were 2 conditions. In one, the communicator had watched the food get moved to the other bucket. She saw the switch happen. She knew she was pointing wrong. In the other, she left the room before the switch. She didn't know the food had moved. She was honestly mistaken. The dogs behaved differently in each condition. When the communicator had seen the switch and still pointed wrong, the dogs were more likely to ignore her. When she genuinely didn't know, when her mistake was honest, they followed more often. They weren't just tracking whether the information was correct. They were tracking whether the person giving it had the knowledge to know better. That's the closest any study has come to showing that a non-human animal can distinguish between a lie and a mistake. It doesn't prove dogs understand deception as a concept. But it puts the behavior somewhere that simple conditioning doesn't comfortably explain. And they're not the only ones paying attention to what humans signal. In 2016, Amy Smith at the University of Sussex showed 28 horses photographs of angry and happy human faces. The horses' heart rates spiked at angry expressions, and they turned to look with their left eye, the one wired to the brain hemisphere that processes threat. Not evidence of detecting deception, but evidence that the reading goes both ways, and it isn't limited to dogs. Now flip the question. You've been assuming this is about animals catching your deception. But in the 1970s, an anthropologist named Lynn Miles raised an orangutan called Chantek at the University of Tennessee. Chantek learned roughly 150 signs in American Sign Language. And then he started lying. He stole a pencil eraser, tucked it into his cheek, opened his mouth wide, and signed, "Food eat. Nothing here. Already swallowed." Researchers caught him in deceptions roughly 3 times a week. He would distract Miles with one long arm, while the other quietly reached for her lunch. An animal that can construct a false story has some working model of what you're likely to believe. And if it has that model, it has the raw material for noticing when what you're saying doesn't match what it can see. You thought you were the only species that lies. You're not even the most creative one in the room. Now forget mammals entirely. In 2010, Roland Anderson and his team at the Seattle Aquarium tested whether 8 giant Pacific octopuses could distinguish between individual humans. For 2 weeks, one keeper fed them. Another touched them with a bristly stick. Both wore identical uniforms. After 2 weeks, every octopus behaved differently toward the 2 people, friendly to one, defensive toward the other. At a separate lab at the University of Otago in New Zealand, one octopus took it further. Every time one particular staff member walked past the tank, it shot her with a jet of water down the back of her neck. Not anyone else, just her, every time. An invertebrate, separated from you by 500 million years of evolution, building a profile of individual humans and acting on it with what looks a lot like personal grudge. Which brings us to the elephants. And this is the part that's hard to sit with. In 2014, Karen McComb at the University of Sussex played recordings of human voices to 47 elephant family groups in Amboseli, Kenya. 2 groups of people. The Maasai, cattle herders who have killed elephants for generations to protect their livestock. And the Kamba, farmers who pose almost no threat. Same sentence, different languages. When the elephants heard adult Maasai men, they bunched together, raised their trunks to smell the air, and moved carefully away. Maasai women, Maasai boys, Kamba men, barely a reaction. They were sorting humans by language, gender, and age, and assigning a threat level to each combination. But here's the part that stays with you. The calves in those herds had never been hunted, never been chased, never seen a spear or heard a gunshot. They pressed against their mothers at the sound of a Maasai man's voice because they were taught to. Not through DNA, through something closer to culture. Families led by matriarchs older than 42 never retreated from boys' voices. Families led by younger matriarchs retreated nearly half the time. The older the elephant, the finer the sorting. Decades of experience compressed into a judgment about which humans are dangerous, passed down to animals who never met the people they were warned about. The skeptic says all of this is conditioning. The dog learned a pattern. The octopus associated a face with discomfort. Chantek figured out what gets a reaction. The elephant calves followed their mother's lead without understanding why. None of it requires understanding what a lie is. And maybe that's right. The Leonardo study is the hardest to dismiss. Those dogs seem to track not just outcomes, but whether the person had access to the truth. But seem to is doing real work in that sentence. We can measure every behavior. We can record every response. What we can't do is ask any of them whether something shifted inside, whether it felt anything like what happens in you when someone you trusted turns out to be someone you shouldn't have. The behavior is measurable. The inner experience isn't. And maybe that gap is the honest answer to the question in the title. You thought you were the one doing the evaluating, deciding which animals are smart, which are safe, which ones deserve your attention. But the whole time, every species with the wiring to do it has been building a profile of you, reading your sweat, watching your hands, listening to your language, sorting you into categories you didn't know existed. And maybe the fact that so many of them still choose to stay close, even knowing what they know, says less about their judgment than it does about what we haven't quite earned yet. So the next time you crouch down and tell your dog something you don't quite mean, that the car ride will be fun, that you'll be right back, that there's nothing to worry about, understand this. It may not know you're lying, but it knows something changed in you. It caught the shift on your skin, read the hesitation in your hands, and checked it against every other time you've said that exact thing in that exact voice. And it got in the car anyway. Not because it believed you, because somewhere in the wiring that has kept it beside you for 15,000 years, it decided you were worth the risk. That was its call, not yours.